Fidel Castro, the Cuban leader who epitomized the very image of a revolutionary with his scruffy beard, uniform, and cigar, has died at the age of 90.
Pronto seré ya como todos los demás. A todos nos llegará nuestro turno, pero quedarán las ideas de los comunistas cubanos.
Castro ruled Cuba for half a century while wrangling 11 U.S. presidents and helping bring the world to the brink of nuclear war. Castro at first animated millions in Cuba and across the world with his promises of democracy and social justice, including the ideals of free healthcare, housing, and education. But he also had a ruthless totalitarian streak, outlawing free speech, jailing dissidents, executing opponents, and banning fair elections, spurring waves of hundreds of thousands of exiles to make their way to the U.S. He was born in 1926 on the island's wild eastern tip and was the illegitimate son of a former Spanish soldier who had become a rich landowner and his maid. His father sent him to Havana to study at Cuba's best schools, and after a short flirtation with electoral politics as a young man, Castro turned to armed revolt to depose Cuba's dictator, General Fulgencio Batista. A first attempt in 1953 failed, but the small group recruited enough support to force the dictator to flee the country on January 1, 1959. A week later, a cigar-chomping Mr. Castro, then 32, and his small guerrilla army entered Havana atop tanks and jeeps, receiving an enthusiastic welcome from thousands of Cubans. Cuba was initially recognized by the U.S. government. Shortly after taking power, Castro visited then Vice President Richard Nixon in Washington, but relations with the U.S. fell apart quickly after Castro initiated close trade ties with the then Soviet Union under Nikita Khrushchev. While he sought to free Cuba of its dependence on sugar and make it wealthy, Castro ultimately bankrupted the island after making it dependent on the Soviet Union and then Venezuela. In October 1960, Castro confiscated all large businesses in Cuba, and thousands of terrified Cubans fled the island. President Dwight D. Eisenhower severed diplomatic ties between the U.S. and Cuba in 1961 and later put an embargo on commodities like sugar. In April 1961, at the Bay of Pigs, Castro's militia defeated an invasion force of 1,500 Cuban exiles trained by the U.S. counterintelligence agency. Countering the threat of a U.S.-backed invasion, Castro strengthened military ties with the Soviet Union, allowing them to place missiles on the island. Their discovery a year later led to a tense showdown between the two Cold War superpowers, bringing the world the closest it has ever been to nuclear war. Castro stepped down as president in 2008, handing power over to his brother Raul, but still often commanded the world stage, raging against the US and predicting nuclear war. In 2015, President Barack Obama began a process of détente with the island, which has led to the establishment of full diplomatic relations and increased economic ties and travel by US visitors to Cuba. It's uncertain whether recently elected Donald Trump will continue with President Obama's Cuba policy.